Joining me now, Emergency Management and Agriculture Minister Murray Watt. Thank you very much for your time. Some of the dramatic pictures, basically an inland sea in the west there of New South Wales. Some of these areas I don't think were on maps where we were supposed to see, a lot more rain with climate change. Is this a climate change factor, or is this just a La Nina event at the moment?
Well, I don't know that you can ever really attribute one individual event to climate change, but I think we can all see what's happening in Australia. The repeated floods that we're having over so much of the country, and much more intense floods than we've seen. And that, of course, comes on the back of those horrific bushfires that we had only about 3 years ago. There is something that's happening here in Australia's climate. And I think that the reality is that if we don't take more serious action, we're going to be seeing even more intense and more frequent events of the kind that we're seeing now. So, clearly, this is a direct result of the La Nina conditions that we're experiencing at the moment, the third consecutive La Nina that Australia has experienced. But underpinning all of this is that the climate is changing both in Australia and right across the world.
One of the big issues we always see is months, sometimes years into this, people are still sitting there waiting for a rebuild to happen. There's already a bit of an issue getting builders in Australia. What can or what are you going to do to make sure these areas will have enough builders? It's, they can get the insurance payouts, that's fine, but having the workers there to do the rebuild.
Yeah, it's a really challenging situation, Tom. Just the sheer scale of the floods that we've seen right across the country it make it a very difficult challenge, especially at a time when we're seeing trade and supply shortages for any form of construction across the country. We have been working very closely with the state and territory governments and local governments as well to, wherever possible, try to get the trades that are needed in, but I'm not going to pretend that it's easy. And that's why one of the other things that we've been doing with the states is trying to really ramp up the temporary accommodation availability to be able to move portable homes in and out of areas much more quickly than we've seen in the past.
So is there anything that can be done on the trades front, or is that just hoping people go to where it's needed most?
I'd say it's more than hoping. There's certainly work underway, but I'd have to say that it's work in progress. I mean, the fact is that there are still some areas that were affected by the bushfires 3 years ago that are still in a rebuilding process. And of course, you had those terrible floods that hit southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales earlier in the year, then the July floods that hit New South Wales, and now we've got a flooding situation that is currently extending across Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, and soon South Australia as well. So there is work underway, but we need to be realistic that this is not going to be something that can be solved straight away. We'll work as quickly as we possibly can with state governments and look at whatever can be done to get the trades in that are needed. And as I say, we've actually been in discussions again this week with New South Wales about how we can be potentially moving some of the temporary homes that are coming offline from those bushfire areas into some of these newer areas that are hit by these floods now as well.
Yeah, well, in the short term, I'm sure people will be hoping that can happen as quickly as possible. A lot has been spoken about people that struggle to get insurance. It's a serious issue. But what about people who are insured now who might struggle in the future? The only way insurance companies are willing to insure a whole lot of these properties, they get reinsurance on the global market. Is it on your sort of to-do list to figure out whether that could be an issue in the future, whether people are looking at Australia, the combination of fires and floods, and thinking, do we want to be the reinsurer for this country?
Yeah, again, I think insurance is becoming an increasing challenge right across the country. I guess I first encountered the severe insurance crisis in North Queensland in my role as a senator in some of those cyclone-exposed communities that were finding it increasingly difficult to get insurance or afford it when it was available. But now, pretty much every flood zone I go into, and even over the last few weeks, I've been into Victoria, Western New South Wales, Tassie and South Australia, and something that keeps coming up from all of these communities is that they weren't able to get insurance even before these floods happened. I think there's no doubt that for insurers and reinsurers, the escalating risk that we're seeing is making it less viable for them to provide insurance. And I guess that's why we are starting to invest so much more in resilience as a country to try to bring that risk down.
Right, yeah, so you can do that. It's about resilience, building the right sort of homes, perhaps moving people out of areas which has been spoken about. But is there also going to be inescapably a bigger role for the federal government to play around being some form of either insurer of last resort or backup or reinsurer. Is that just going to have to be the government's role going forward?
Well, we certainly haven't decided to do that at this point, Tom, and that is a big call that would require a seriously large investment from the federal government to do that. We did see the former government put in place a reinsurance scheme with a $10 billion provision for North Queensland, and frankly, we're still waiting to see what results that actually produces. We're getting very mixed reports out of North Queensland about whether that has really produced much of an insurance benefit to people, and I guess I want to make sure that if we're going to be investing taxpayers' money in these solutions, they actually deliver a return. That's why I said
So you look closely at that to see
conference.
How well that works and then how feasible it might be for other parts of the country. Because people will be watching this and thinking, what if I can't get insurance next?
Yeah. Well, of course, we're going to look at how that reinsurance scheme for North Queensland rolls out and whether it does deliver the benefits that were promised by the former government. As I say, it's early days yet, and we're not really seeing that level of benefit come through despite that very significant investment from government. But I made a speech at the Insurance Council's annual conference a couple of weeks ago where I really put on the agenda the need for insurers to start responding in terms of premiums as a result of the government's investment in mitigation. All the discussions I had with insurers prior to the election as the Shadow Minister indicated that if we could see some really serious federal government investment in mitigation and much better information sharing with insurers and government, that could lead to a serious reduction in insurance premiums for people. What I was saying to insurers is we've now done what they asked for. We've now created a fund that'll invest up to $200 million a year in disaster mitigation, exactly what the industry asked for. Where possible, we want to see that matched by state, territory and local governments. And I'd like to see insurers come to the party now if we're doing what they said was required to help provide some relief around insurance.
Seems like it's still a relatively small pot of money to me to make a huge difference, but perhaps that's a subject for another day. Murray Watt, Minister, thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Tom.